In this video lecture, we're going to discuss consent forms for usability studies. What are consent forms, why are they necessary, and what needs to go in them? So why do we need consent forms? The short answer to that is because ethics. Back in, well, I shouldn't say a long time ago, but there have been some very interesting studies, and usually in the field of psychology, that weren't really the most ethical things in the world. People who were in them sometimes felt very badly about their participation. They felt, well, not abused, but definitely used, and they felt distress. We don't want to do that to people. So we want to make sure that we have consent forms so people understand what it is they are getting into. We can't treat people like we are the mad scientists who have control and can do whatever we want. Instead, we have to realize that participants have rights. So you, as a researcher, you have to respect and acknowledge that participants have these rights, and you have to seek their informed consent. What is this informed consent thing? Well, informed, it means you're telling people what's going on, and consent says yes. So in other words, the minimum requirement is that the participant understands what the research is and what they are consenting to. And they need to know that before they get into the study. Another reason that we need consent forms is that institutional review boards, or IRBs, require these things. So what's an IRB? What it does is an organization that is in a university or in a major company. They review research proposals and they make sure that these proposals, the research that's going to be done, is ethical. There's a URL I'm going to give you here. This is for Kennesaw's IRB. So if you want to find out about it, you can click this or write it down, follow it, or just Google Research Kennesaw IRB and you'll hit this. So then, how does IRB going to affect you? You're a student taking TCOM 2010. What do you need to know about this? How is it going to affect your life and your research? Well, the thing is, it really doesn't a whole lot. The thing is, usability studies, these are generally exempt from IRB review. They involve minimal risk and they count as assessment. So let's talk about minimal risk first. Minimal risk, I've copied this definition, but basically it says that anything that happens in normal life, the risks the participant will encounter in normal life, the risks that they encounter during a study should be no worse than that. Then let's talk assessment. There's a difference between formal research and then there's assessment. Research is a sort of thing where you've got a formal testable question or hypothesis. You've got a literature review. You're gathering in systematic and unbiased manner. So the thing is here, you're providing generalizable information that can be disseminated. So in other words, research would be the sort of thing that a professor would do. They'd go to a conference and they'd give a talk on it. They'd write a paper. It would go in a journal. They'd write a book. That's the sort of thing we're talking about here. Assessment, on the other hand, is looking at a system and saying, oh, here's one thing that's going on right now. Here's how we can improve that. It applies to just the situation that we're examining, and we are not going to publicize it, give it away, go do talks on it and show everybody in the world these videos of people doing the usability test. We aren't going to do that. So what we do is assessment. It's not research. If you want to read more about this, here's a URL that explains the difference. Also, just generally speaking, student class projects are generally exempt from review. So if you look at the FAQs of Kennesaw's IRB website, you'll see this, and the short answer is basically you need to treat everybody ethically, but because you're doing student work for a classroom, that's cool. Doesn't mean you're off the hook though. Please note, it is expected that KSU students, faculty, and staff will uphold the same ethical treatment of those participants even if there is no need for IRB review. So that means you, yes you, need to have your participants sign consent forms. So what kind of consent forms do you need to have? There are a variety of these. There's a general consent form. You need to have one copy of these things for your participant, one copy for your files. You need to have a video release form if you're taking videos. You need to have an online survey consent form if you're doing an online survey. If you're doing anything with minors, you have to have a parental consent form. Sometimes there is information that is proprietary and can't get out. You need to have the participant sign a non-disclosure agreement, or NDA. If you do that, make sure that you hire a lawyer because, well, you want this thing to be airtight. We're going to talk about general consent forms. The other things are interesting, but general consent forms are the ones that's really going to be important to you. So, what goes into one? Well, I'm glad that you asked. Here are the mandatory requirements that the Code of Federal Regulations requires you to do for a study with minimal risk. Yeah, that's a lot of stuff. So we're just going to summarize the key points in this. So we got 19 slides. We're going to bust through fairly quickly. The first one, a statement that the study involves research. So people are not lab rats. You can't do things to them. You can do with them. Also, when you do a study, you have to make sure that people know that they are getting into a study. You can't have them do something and say, "Oh, right, cool. Now that I've watched you and taken notes, what?" You got to tell them up front what they're getting into. That's informed consent at the very base. You also need to include descriptions of what the study is about and how the study is going to be run. You don't need to give them ultra detailed information about this, but you need to let them know at least what's up. The thing is, if you have somebody walk up to a machine, "Here, check out this machine," it's like, I don't know what's going on, what's going to happen to me. Is that scary looking thing on the end that's spinning? Is that something I need to watch out for? Is it something I'm going to be using? Is something going to be used on me? So point being, make sure people know what is up before they get into the study. You have to explain how the session is going to be recorded. You will be taking data recordings of some kind, if it's handwritten notes, if it is video recordings, audio recordings, screen captures, eye tracking, all sorts of possibilities. Tell people what they'll be doing, what will happen to them. How long is the session expected to go? Sometimes people have things to do. They have to go get the ice cream and out of the car. Perhaps they have children they need to go pick up from school or what have you. Point being, people are not your prisoners. You have to let them go. If you bring them in and you trap them, that's very, very bad. A description of any risks that are involved. So risks are, well, there's quite a variety of risks that are possible. There could be physical risks, there could be psychological risks, social risks, economic risks. They could lose their confidentiality and information gets out. It could be embarrassing. Sometimes there's legal consequences possible. You have to tell people what could conceivably happen to them. Now, that being said, if there are no likely risks that are worse than everyday life, just say so and it's all good. I would very strongly encourage you, by the way, when you're doing a usability test, try to make sure that there are no likely risks. You have to describe benefits that the participants will get. So they almost always get paid. And when you do say they're going to get paid, be concrete about how much they will be paid. For example, you will receive $50 for your participation. I can tell you that $50 on a professional study, it really isn't a whole lot. I did have been a participant in a couple, and I got, I think it was $75, it was $95. I mean, these things pay pretty well. As students, you're going to have to give people something. Oftentimes, pizza is a good attraction for college students. But the point being, be concrete about what you are going to give your participants. Also, please note that benefits are not necessarily just money. Benefits can be things like political power, knowledge, previews of upcoming releases. I mean, this could be like great for a blogger. Wow, I could sell this information. Well, if that's going to happen and you don't want that proprietary information to get out, you might need an NDA in that case. But the point being here, there are other things than money that people can benefit from. So if there's something of the sort, say what it is. Also, please note that sometimes there is just no benefit. If someone comes in, does a study, and you might pay them, but there's no other real benefit they get out of it. They just do their thing, and they're like, okay, cool, I got a couple of bucks. Well, that's fine. In that case, you just say there are no direct benefits to participants. You have to say how the data is going to be used. So once you've collected the data, tell us, what are you going to do with it? The big deal here is you have to make sure you let your users know that the purpose is not going to be sitting around hooting at videos of them bumbling their way through. Instead, what exactly are you going to do with the data and how are you going to distribute it? You have to describe the confidentiality procedures. We are not going to do things like, oh, take our usability study research stuff home and just let it sitting around out in the open where anybody can see it. We're just going to stash it in boxes in our bathroom. No, we don't do that. What we actually do, we keep it locked away somewhere. Now, if you take physical records, make sure you keep them under your direct control. Put them somewhere where nobody else can get at them. If you have them online, as you may likely have, make sure that they're behind some sort of password. The big deal is you need to shield people's names. You need to explain how you're going to store the data. And quite possibly, are you going to destroy the data at some point if it's somehow sensitive? You need a statement that participation is voluntary. You can't just dragoon people and say, you're going to be in my study. That's not either ethical, nor are you going to be able to get good results, because resentful people will not give you good results. They may also just tell you what you want to hear because you have some sort of power over them. You need to include a statement that the participant has rights. In particular, they have the right to quit at any time and to withdraw their data. Remember, they are not your prisoners. They are free to come and go as they like. And if they want to take their data and go home, then so be it. Even if they come back after the study is over and say, you know what, I don't really feel comfortable, I would like to withdraw my data, you have to say, okay, and then just delete or take out whatever it is that they did and not count them in the study. You need to include a statement that the product is being tested, not the user. This is kind of important, so I'm going to repeat it. A statement that the product is being tested, not the user. This is vital because sometimes the thing that you are testing, well, people will think, wow, I can't do this. I've failed somehow. Now, if they can't use it, it's a problem with the product. It is not a problem with the person using it. You need to include a statement that the person running the test doesn't care what the outcome is. This is one of the reasons that we don't like to have designers actually run a usability test, because they're invested in it. Like the whole idea of my baby, this is my baby, you're telling me my baby is ugly? Well, people get offended. So yeah, you need to make sure that you tell the people, the participants, if I'm running the test, I don't care what the result is. Whatever you do as a participant is correct. You also need to make sure that if there's a vulnerable population of any kind, you need to explain how you're going to protect them. Now, a vulnerable population is somebody like a minor, somebody who's a prisoner, somebody who can't make decisions particularly well because of mental problems, people who are not well educated, people who don't have a lot of money, people who are students, actually, because, well, you're a student, I'm a professor. What if I say, hey, student, I need you to do this? Well, do you feel obligated to do so? Most likely. Also, employees. If the boss comes and says, you need to be in the usability test. Well, gee, what am I supposed to do? Can I really say no? What if I don't like it? Will the boss get mad at me? This sort of thing here. The big idea is that vulnerable populations are people who are vulnerable to coercion or undue influence. You are not allowed to play puppet master. That's the big thing here. You need to include contact information for the researchers and also the IRB. In particular, KSU's IRB is available at this URL. You have to also make sure that people realize that they have retained all their rights. You can't say, oh, well, you've signed this, and, well, gee, you signed it, and you cut off your hand, and you lost your memory, and gee, that's not our fault, or you went broke, oh no, or your personal information got out, and you got embarrassed, well, not our problem. No, that is not the issue. Instead, this is all on you. It is your job to keep people safe. They keep all their rights when they come in. You also need to make a statement about the people that you have in the participant sample. How old are they? If there are no minors, and please, no minors in TCOM 4120 studies, you have to use a variation on this phrase. All participants must be at least 18 years old. Something like that will be just fine. Now, if you're doing an online survey, you need to include a statement about collecting IP addresses. IP address is an Internet Protocol address. Basically, it's a number. It's used to identify a computer or a network of computers. So if you collect that IP address, theoretically, someone can follow it back to an individual computer, which can be attached to an individual person, and it could be embarrassing. What do you do about that? Well, if your survey is confidential, you can collect these things. But if your survey is anonymous, you cannot collect them. I suggest just generally, as a best practice, try to avoid collecting IP addresses. If you need them, you can collect them. If you don't absolutely need them, then just don't. And also, minimal risk. Remember, in a 4120, we want to have studies that are minimal risk. Generally speaking, usability studies should be minimal risk. But sometimes you're going to have more than minimal risk. So, what should you do? You have to provide a couple of things. One is emergency contact information in case someone is hurt. You have to include a statement about compensation or treatment for injuries. And you also have to detail very strong procedures for how you're going to store and destroy data. Consider if you're going to do something like this for Kennesaw State, you'd want to link to the Kennesaw website. You would also want to provide the phone number for the police. And by the way, the Kennesaw police are at 470-578-6666. Please do not call 911. 911 will go to an outside switchboard, and then they'll have to call our police department. So if something really goes wrong, call 6666, not 911. And last, if your participants are students, you have to provide a couple of things. If the test participation is for class credit, you have to provide some sort of alternative participating. Also, if there is if the instructor is running the test sessions, that's undue influence. You have to have arrangements for somebody who is not the instructor to run those test sessions, because, well, it could be bad. This seems like a lot of stuff, doesn't it? Well, it is, but that's okay. Don't panic, because KSU has a template. Go to this URL, or you can also just Google search for Kennesaw IRB consent template. Scroll down the page, open up this box for signed consent, click the exempt consent template, and you will see this. That's right, a Microsoft Word document. All you have to do is fill in the red text, and you're off to the races. So let's review what you've learned so far. We've talked about why you need consent forms. We've talked about the definition of informed consent. We've talked about what an IRB is and what it does. We've talked about the required contents for a general consent form. And we've also told you how to get KSU's template consent form. That'll do for today. So thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me.